Greetings, my fellow mechaniacs and other hobbyists, and welcome back to Sork's Mech Shop. This is part 2 of our introduction to the hobby series, Happy Little Orksidents. Last week we went over cutting our Wii Figures parts off the sprue, cleaning the excess plastic off, assembling it together, drilling out the barrels of the pistol, and then priming it black and doing a rough pre-highlight by quick white dry brushing. In this episode we'll cover doing a simple but effective paint job using a very limited set of paints. Once again, the goal here is to do as little as possible while achieving results that you can be proud of as a beginner. The first step to that is to minimize purchases. So I'm only going to ask you to buy one brush and just a few paints. I will talk a little bit about the paints during the course of painting since I recorded that before doing the introduction. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about them right now, a little bit more deliberately, to give you some more information about each choice. First, there are a lot of different types of paints to select from, but as a beginner in miniature painting, you're best off selecting acrylic paints rather than oil paints or enamel paints. Those all differ in terms of the solution that the pigment is suspended in, and that solution affects how they dry and how you have to clean your brushes. Acrylic paints can be thinned and cleaned with regular water while it's wet. It's non-toxic, it gives off no fumes. If it's dried, it can be cleaned with regular rubbing alcohol. The other paint types will have their place in your toolbox as you gain experience, and I'll definitely be doing videos on them in the future as I really enjoy oil paints in particular. But for now, you'll want to pick acrylic paints. Secondly, with regard to paint, and I mentioned it again in the tutorial, but for this exercise, it does not matter what brand you use at all. There are advantages and disadvantages to paints made specifically for miniatures, but those advantages come with a price tag, and since you're just getting started and you don't know if you'll enjoy this hobby or not, I'm going to do this tutorial assuming that you're just grabbing a small starter kit or a few bottles of paint from your local art store. They're significantly cheaper than most miniature paints on the per ounce basis. I also use art store products frequently in my hobby in any case, so I don't think you're going to waste them. You'll definitely use them again on other projects, even if you do continue in this hobby. And you can use them on other art projects that are not in this hobby if you don't choose to continue with miniature painting. I did use one miniature paint in the tutorial, but only because I couldn't find my dark blue from the set that I got the yellow and the brown in until after filming was done, of course. But in any case, the paints that you want to use are a titanium white, like this one, and all of mine are from Liquitex, all of mine are from Liquitex except for the blue. So titanium white is one of them. I also got a burnt umber, also from Liquitex. The Imperial Navy is the only one that's not. That one's from the Army Painter War Paints collection. And then I did a medium yellow azo, also from Liquitex. And then finally, I was originally going to go with just those, but then I also added in kind of at the last minute. I won't use it in this tutorial, but I'll use it in the part 3 tutorial. Is a burnt sienna color, which is also from Liquitex. For those, again, the white, I picked titanium white. It could be any white. The burnt umber could really be any dark brown. The dark blue could be ultramarine blue from Liquitex or any other art store product, or it could be any dark blue. The medium yellow azo could really be any kind of medium range bright yellow. The burnt sienna could be any kind of medium red brown color. Again, I'm kind of going more for a shade, a tone, a brightness level. I'm not really going for a specific brand or a specific color. If you watch some tutorials, they'll get really specific about things and try to get you to match them exactly. The goal here is more for the kind of the feeling and the vibe to kind of get you in the ballpark, not necessarily to get you to match everything exactly. And hopefully you'll enjoy the hobby a little more that way. You won't stress about getting anything perfect, because frankly, the reason I named this whole series Happy Little Orksidents is kind of a riff on the Bob Ross Happy Little Accidents thing, in case you didn't figure that out on your own. I'm sure you did. But the way I look at the painting side of things is that I don't try to get it exactly like box art, because that's kind of boring to me. Every piece is my own invention, and if it doesn't match box art, that's fine. If two of my orcs look different, their skin tone's different or whatever, that's fine too. My skin tone's not exactly like somebody else's skin tone, so who cares? Even in the Army, I used to be in the Army, no two uniforms looked exactly alike, even though they call them uniforms, because mine might have been worn a little bit longer than somebody else's. So in the real world, no two things match, so there's no reason the two things should match out of my collection either. Anyway, moving back to the tutorial. I mentioned that I'll ask you to buy one brush. The one brush I will ask you to buy, if you don't already have it, is a number 2 round brush. Okay, that refers to the shape. It'll be marked on the box or on the bin that you get it from. But round and with a good point. Here, I'll put this up to the camera so you can see what a good point looks like. It doesn't have to be, mine is sable. It doesn't have to be sable. It can be sable or it can be synthetic, whichever one hits your wallet less. But just make sure it looks like it comes to a nice point. It doesn't look like it's frayed or cut off flat or anything like that. The good point's going to be useful for making sure that you can be precise when you're going in against the edges of the model and things like that, which you'll see when we're painting. The only other things you'll need besides the paints and the brush are some paper towels. Hopefully you have some of those at home already. 2 containers of water. Any container will do. Dixie cups, plastic cups, glasses, water cups, whatever, doesn't matter. Again, it's all water washable. One of those cups is going to be for putting a dirty brush in to wash it out, and so it'll have, you know, paint and water mixed together. The other one should stay clean. It's going to have clean water in it, and you'll use that to take water out to add to your paints to thin them down. And then you'll also want to have a good light source, some kind of lamp right over your table. A desk lamp's fine, or just be in a place that's well lit. And then something on your table to protect it from spills. If you don't have anything better, the cheapest thing you can do is just take a plastic trash bag, lay it down, use some tape. You don't even have to cut it open, just lay it down flat, tape it down, and you can use it as a trash bag after you're done, no big deal. Once you have all that together, you're ready to go. Okay, so now that we've got the pre-highlighting done, where do we start on this guy? Well, to be honest with you, especially when I'm trying to go quick, one of the things I like to do is think about the model in layers. Think about it going from in to out, right? So the reason for that is that the harder to reach places are more likely to get hit by your brush on your way out again, right? So generally speaking, in a model like this, I would actually start off with things like the skin going in, because, you know, you've got layers of cloth covering it, right? So start from the skin, working your way out. So in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the green skin. To do that, I don't have a green handy, and the kit that I got from Liquitex didn't include a green. So I'm just going to randomly grab a yellow and a blue that I've got handy, and we're just going to mix a green, because again, that's what we learned in kindergarten, right? So any blue, any green, doesn't matter. In this case, I happen to have a dark Imperial Navy from Army Painter. Squeeze a little bit out of that onto my dry palette here. And then I've got a scale color Tenere yellow. All right, again, doesn't really matter. You're just doing a blue and a yellow. The other thing I'll say, you know, if you're watching other YouTube videos, first of all, how dare you? Second of all, a lot of them will tell you that there's things called like wet palettes out there, right? And wet palettes are a thing. I use one all the time in my own painting practice. But once again, I'm going for the beginner painter. Now, one thing I do have, I've got a little pot of water over here. It's clean water. I also have a little squeezy bottle of water here. Generally speaking, what you want to do is you want to have one paint or one pot of clean water that you use to clean your brushes, and then another container of clean water that you can use to dilute your miniature paints with. And then, yeah, I just happen to have a clean pot, so I mixed it with that instead of using my squeezy bottle, that's all. But we'll start off, we'll go ahead and get a little bit of each of these here onto my palette, and then just sort of mix them together until we find the right blend that we like, that looks green enough for our orc. And if it doesn't look green enough, well, we just keep working on it. And maybe we find a different yellow, I don't know. It doesn't have to be perfect, you know. These are our orcs, they can look as blue or as yellow as we want them to look. But blue and yellow, it's blue and yellow, it makes green, right? All right, I think I messed up this batch a little bit. What I ended up doing was attempting to walk you through this, and I realized I didn't have my camera going correctly. So what I said was I have some Liquitex yellow, medium yellow, and what I was saying also was that it's a semi-transparent paint. You can tell this is one of the advantages of using the artist grade paints, is because they'll tell you if they're opaque, semi-transparent, or fully transparent. They'll also tell you the pigment used on the side, and that will mean that whatever brand you pick up, you're always getting essentially the same mixture of paints. And then I didn't have the Liquitex blue on hand that came with the set, so I just grabbed kind of a decent, you know, dark blue to go with it. Then I grabbed, you know, just kind of a nice big splotch of the yellow, and then added just a little bit of dark blue and mixed it up with some water to make kind of a thin blue-green, or, you know, kind of a yellow heavy green, to start painting my orc skin. And as I was saying to the dead camera that wasn't running because I forgot to turn it on, covering it with a thin paint over the black with the white highlights that I was doing earlier kind of gives me that pre-highlighting that I was talking about before, and allows some of that pre-highlighting to show up through it a little bit, as you can tell, just ever so slightly coming through. And it's mostly there as a guide for me on future coats so that I know where to put my highlights. But it's also an opportunity for me as a painter to kind of get a sense of, you know, what the model is going to look like as it progresses, right? And I was also trying to tell you before I realized that I wasn't actually talking to you, I was just talking to a dead camera, that one of the things that I find stalls a lot of people out is by trying to make everything perfect on the first try. And I would really encourage you not to do that. I would encourage you to just kind of get the paint on the model, like just kind of push paint, you know, everywhere. Push the pigments to every corner of the model that you want to put pigments on, put color everywhere. And if it's not perfect, it's not perfect. You know what I mean? You can always come back with other layers as long as you're working in thin layers. You can always come back and fix stuff later. The value of having a little bit of paint on the model, a little bit of paint on every part of the model, is that you can kind of see how it's coming together as you go, and you get a little bit of an emotional payback as you go as well. And so if you don't do that, then you run the risk of sort of, I don't know, for me anyway, I kind of lose motivation, right? Like I kind of see that I've got this sea of gray out there, or I've got all these unpainted models, and I just, you know, feel like it's not making any progress, and I don't, you know, I lose motivation. So it's a trick that I use to just keep flowing forward. All right, so he's pretty much got the green on him, maybe a little bit, a touch under there, just because that neck is kind of showing a little bit. Yeah, he's got most of the green going for the skin, and you know, I can keep him going. I can keep moving with other parts of the body. So what do you think? I'm thinking maybe like a nice brown for the back, for the you know, for the cloth here. You know, I don't necessarily pre-plan ahead of time too much on a lot of these. I have, when I'm doing the first model anyway, if I'm doing a whole army, then maybe I do pre-plan a little bit, but for the first model of an army, not necessarily. So for this guy, let's see, one of the colors that came with the set of these artist colors was a nice raw umber, which is kind of a dark brown. So we'll throw that one out there on the palette. It's just kind of your generic brown. What I'll do to that is I'll add a little bit of the white to it, and again a little bit of water, kind of mix in, again thinning it out a little bit, and we're just kind of creating kind of a leather tone over here, something that doesn't obscure too much of the model, right? Just something that we can work from as a nice leather, right? And again, the goal here is to just lay that that paint down on the model. Don't spend too much time on it. One trick that I like is using the side of the brush, especially when you're working your way around parts that are raised. Remember, this is not a coloring book. I mean, it kind of is, right? It's kind of a coloring book, but it's also a three-dimensional coloring book, which means that you can actually use the surface of the model as a guide for your brush. And you can let it kind of move the bristles around for you, and let it help you cheat a little bit on where the paintbrush goes, and let it help you color stuff in, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a little bit easier than a regular coloring book even. kind of working our way around his shirt. We'll also go ahead and get his breech cloth here a little bit, just gray. I'm not really sure what color that's going to be at the end, but I figure we'll go ahead and start off with it being the same color as the shirt, just because I'm not sure what I want it to be yet. And you know, most of the orc stuff winds up being kind of dirty anyway, so it's okay for it to start off dirty. And then I want to make sure I get the sleeves around his arms here. And while I'm at it, you know, I'm kind of looking over here and I'm noticing that the edges around here yeah, so kind of looking at where all that goes. Not really sure what I'm gonna do with these pants yet, but you know, maybe we can do some blue jeans for him. What do you think? Maybe some blue jeans. So we'll start off with the dark blue we used before, and I'm trying to keep a relatively limited palette to this, so I'm not trying to throw a million different paints on my board here. So really, all I've got so far is that yellow, this blue, and that brown, and then the white. That's all I got so far, right? So I'm gonna try to keep it relatively limited like that. So I'm gonna get a little more white on my brush here, and I'm gonna put it over on this corner. I'm gonna mix a little bit of that blue in there, and we're gonna make some blue jeans out of that. And depending on how crazy we get, we'll do either some stonewash blue jeans, or we'll do some nice dark Levi's. You know, we'll see. Let the palette be our judge of how we want to go with that. Yeah, something like that. We'll go with that. We'll start there. We'll decide if we want to get darker or lighter or whatever as we go. Just kind of play it by ear. You know what I mean? Doesn't have to be perfect on the first try. Just want to make it kind of neat. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you end up over painting anything at all. I was almost going to paint on the boots, and I might have, you know, and if I did, not a big deal. I can always come back and paint those boots a different color if I want to. It's really easy to fix all this stuff, especially because I'm going fast, and not a big deal. So there we go. Some very simple blue jeans for our guy here. And again, we're gonna come back and we're gonna make these look better, but gotta start somewhere, right? So at the moment, what do we have? We've got blue jeans, we've got a brown shirt, we've got some green, you know, for his muscles and whatnot. We're gonna come back, we're gonna eventually do metal for his gun, for his hatchet blade, for the hilt of his hatchet, which they call choppas in the orc language, in case you're curious, and these are called sluggas. We're gonna have metal up here, we're gonna have metal over here, metal for his back plate. We can do metal or we can do wood on the handle of this over here. We can do metal or wood for the handle of this over here. We'll decide that as we go. The boots, we probably want to do a leather of some kind. The belts and stuff we can do, or we can do black if we want to leave it black. The belts we can do black or a different color leather. What I'm thinking though is that we probably want to do at least one other leather that's like a lighter color brown. That's what I'm thinking, just to mix it up a little bit. So we've already got some brown on the palette here, and you know, one of the things that's easy to do and easy to add some variety to your models without adding a lot of paints to your budget and without adding a lot of complexity to your paint scheme is to just kind of flesh that out with a little bit of a lighter color brown, you know, and we can do the lighter color blue too for something else if we want to. but just going with a little bit of a lighter color, you know, tan or khaki or, you know, whatever color brown you want to call it. Just go a little bit lighter. And then we'll use that, let's say we can use that for his necklace and maybe for his pouches and some of the belts. We don't necessarily use it for everything, but I will use it for this skull ornament on his belt, I think. That'll stand out nicely. Might come back and do that metal later on, I don't know, we'll see. I just want to highlight it for the moment just so I don't forget about it later. And then we'll use that to do the belts and whatnot over here. Paint on his necklace. Make sure we're not forgetting about that little guy. Belts over here. Pouches over here. And, you know, as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I don't know if that's going to be dark enough for orcs. I mean, it might be a little too light in the overall color scheme, and that's okay, because what we'll do is we'll take a look at it once we've got the composition all together, and we'll decide together. We'll say, hey, is that too light, too dark, whatever, and we'll decide whether we want to change it up or not. And so typically what I do is this will be like, if I'm doing an army, this will be like the first model I do for the army, and I'll take a look at how it all fits together, and I'll decide if I want to do a whole army like that, or if I want to test it out and decide I don't like it, come back, try again, do a different scheme, you know what I mean? So come back together like that. And again, side of the brush goes a long way to kind of keeping everything neat and using the model to do a lot of the work for you. The other thing you might notice is that I'm intentionally kind of staying out of the deepest recesses when I do this. You don't have to, you know, you can obviously paint as far deep as you want to, but what I find is that doing it this way kind of helps me to sort of increase the amount of contrast there is between my different layers of stuff, you know? That's a technical term right there, layers of stuff. So it helps me keep increase the amount of contrast. So like when you're sitting far away from the model, the thing still pops. You know what I mean? You can still see the gaps between things, and that pop of noticing stuff from a distance is really important if you're playing the game of Warhammer, because you're looking at these guys from across the battlefield. You're not looking at them up close, generally speaking. So that you can do that either like I'm doing it right now, where I'm just sort of painting and skipping some of the lines in between, or we'll do this too later on. But the other way you can do it is by coming back and using a wash of some kind, which is a really thin paint that you apply over textured surfaces like these wraps here, and it's usually a darker paint, and it's usually thinner, and it'll like kind of flow into the lower sections for you. All right, last little bit on the straps is going to be on the belt in front here, and on the straps up there, going to the top. The other thing you might notice is I'm kind of turning the model around as I work on him, because that makes it easier for me to see what I'm trying to get at. Okay. And again, you might not actually go after everything, you know, like if you can't reach something with your brush, odds are good your people that are looking at your model aren't going to see it with their eyes either, in a lot of cases, especially if you're talking about just your rank and file dudes, you know, guys sitting across the table from them. I'm going to go ahead and paint these horns this way too, just to give them some kind of color. I'll come back and fix those later if I want to make them pop a little more too, give them a little bit more contrast with the rest of the model. Oop, almost missed the other wraps on the other side and on the handle of the hatchet there. So here's what we're going to do for that. We're going to actually mix that up a little bit. I'm going to do just a very light tinting of the really darkest brown for that, and then we'll use that for the wraps around the wrist on this side, so we gets more variation of the leathers, right? We don't want all this stuff to look the same, remember? So we'll just do a little dark brown over here, which we can use elsewhere. There you go, and then we'll use probably that middle brown again to get the wrap on around the hatchet there, the chopper. And we'll tidy this up a little bit later. If you notice, looking up in here, I managed to flood the hand a little bit more here, so if you can see that. I managed to flood the hand. There should be some wraps in here that I cover, but I flooded the hand with a little bit extra green. So we'll probably clean that up a little bit later, but for now, we'll just sort of tidy it up a little bit with some of the darker brown to kind of give it a little bit of shadow there, just so we can remember that we want it to look like the inside of the guy's palm. That'll be a later step to clean up. All right, so overall, I would say if you take a look at it, it looks like not a terribly painted kind of model so far, right? It's like you can at least tell there's different parts of the model that are painted. You can tell that what parts each part's supposed to be for the most part, right? Too many parts, sorry. And that's not a bad place to start. So, one little area I did skip already. Sorry about that. Let me get up here again. We do have a little bit more wrapping on the top of the hand on the chopper here. So I'm gonna pause on this for a second. I'm gonna let it dry for a little bit, and then we're gonna come up and work on the next step of this model, but we gotta let it dry a little bit first. So we will come back once this model's had a chance to fully dry. I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough of a very simple paint scheme of our orc boy. In the hobby, we refer to this as a base coat. Pretty much everything has a coat of paint on it, except maybe some of the finest details like the eyes and teeth, I realized after filming. And the coats of paint are thin but neat and clean. I mentioned in the tutorial that it's helpful to have something to hold on to your model while painting it instead of just holding it by the base, so I wanted to demonstrate that right now. You can take just about any kind of hand-sized jar or bottle, ideally something plastic. This one's a little bit small, but still better than just holding onto the base. So you take some poster tack, just the kind of plasticky goo that you use to hold up posters. Get like a healthy glob of it. That's a little too much probably. Get like a healthy glob of it, wad it up, smush it onto the top of your chosen bottle, and then you can just kind of mash your base of your miniature on there. You don't want to push it by the model itself, push it by the miniature. And then once he's nice and firmly embedded into the goo, he'll stay on there, and you can hold him while you're painting and not have to worry so much about your hand getting fatigued as a result of your fingers trying to pinch in that small place. There's also handles available in stores and on Etsy, or that you can make at home, where you can 3D print for yourself. This is the simplest way of getting started, as well as being the cheapest. Next week, we're going to try to kick this guy up a notch by adding some shading and highlighting and texture to the various materials on him in order to make it look a little bit more interesting and realistic. I look forward to seeing your comments, and let me know if you have any newbie tips that I missed. Until next time, hobbyists, keep on looting.